Everybody ready?
think so.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Schainker, City Manager. I want to welcome you to our annual town budget meeting. This is kind of a historic occasion for us. We've been doing these town budget meetings as a staff for probably over 40 years. This is the first time we're trying to do it over Zoom. But due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting, like the city council meetings, will be conducted electronically over Zoom. So I want to put up there different ways you can get in to participate, either if you're going to do it online, through video, or calling in toll free. So rather than repeating it, I'll give it a few seconds for you to write those down. You can participate by video. We've got that site there for you. Or toll free, we've got some telephone numbers. I hope you have a pencil with you. Okay. Well, for those who've been with us, you know, one of the responsibilities as the city manager is to prepare a budget, an operating budget for all the services we provide to our citizens through city government, along with a capital improvement plan, which represents 5 years of projecting out of the major bricks and mortar projects that we hope to accomplish to, again, serve our citizens. And before we do that, before we actually put those two documents together, we like to get input from the citizenry. It could impact some of our recommendations. And if nothing else, we take this information that you give us tonight and we present it to the city council later on when they make their final budget decisions and react to our budget recommendations. Now, they get input in a lot of ways. We have an annual citizen satisfaction survey, which we just reviewed with the city council, which our citizens through a scientifically selected survey gave input into future items, budget items the citizens would like to see. And of course, the city council always interacts with their constituency and get ideas on how to spend money in the coming years. So this is the third way we try to get input into the budget before we even start the project. So our purpose tonight really is twofold. I want the finance director to go over some background on the budget itself. It's good background for all citizens to know about our budget. But more importantly, we're going to open it up for you to give us some input with your ideas on what you like to see in terms of service levels that are contained in the operating budgets. And again, maybe large bricks and mortar projects you'd like to see the city council support in the future. Now, before we start, I want to show you the budget calendar because it's very important you understand, again, we're not at the end of this process. We're at the beginning of this process. So there's plenty of time for you to participate and give input, not only to the city staff, but also to the mayor and council. So Duane, could you put up the budget calendar for us? As I mentioned in April, we reported the findings from our statistically valid survey to the city council, which had ideas for capital improvements, service level increases, and other input into how well or not how well we're doing providing service to our citizens. In September, we've actually, as a city staff, started thinking about the different CIP or capital improvement projects that we're going to have for the next 5 years, and maybe also amending our current budget to see if we're able to complete the projects we had hoped to do in our prior plan. So we've started a little bit looking at our capital improvement projects. In November, here we are tonight, we're conducting the town budget meeting where we hope to receive input from the citizens regarding our upcoming budget. And then in the months of November and December, staff will start drafting up their capital improvement recommendations and their operating budget recommendations. And they will filter that through a group that I've assembled made up of the two assistant city managers, as well as the budget manager and the finance director, who look through their proposals and make recommendations for perhaps adding or cutting from their recommendations. And then during the month of January, I review all those recommendations for the capital improvements plan and the operating budget with the department heads after they've gone through that probe group I've talked about before. Now, a key date for you all will be January 19th, because on January 19th of 2021, we will unveil the capital improvements plan, the 5-year plan, to the city council, and the departments will review all the projects that are contained in that document. The following week is very important because that will be a workshop, which will, an opportunity for the citizens to give input after they have reviewed the CIP recommendation, as the city council has, to give input into the capital improvements plan recommendations. So you may agree with some of those projects. You may think we've left out some, or from time to time, people don't want us to participate in some projects. So that kind of input is very valuable to the city council. Now, other key dates will be in January 29th. That's when the staff and I will unveil the operating budget. That'll be January 29th. And then the following week, on February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, the department heads will give their presentation of their programs, their service levels to the city council for consideration. And the key date is February 9th is the wrap-up session where we hope the city council will make final decisions regarding service levels and capital improvements items that will be reflected in the next budget year. Remember, we're putting together the budget, believe it or not, for fiscal year 21-22, which begins July 1st. Now, during all those meetings or up to those meetings, there's plenty of time for input where you can write the city council through emails, call them, and I'm sure they'll appreciate as much input as possible for that February 9th final decision-making or wrap-up session. And then there's one more technical state requirement. We have to have a final budget hearing and adoption of the budget, which will take place on March 9th. So again, I want to stress we're at the beginning of the process. You may have some ideas that you'd like to see in terms of capital improvement projects, operating service levels that you'd like to share with the city staff and also the city council. Now, I cannot promise you every one of your ideas will be incorporated into our recommendation, but I can promise you we'll listen to them. And many times in the past, this type of input has been influential in influencing our creation of our recommendations as well as the final decisions of the city council. So we really welcome your opinions. I will also like to say that if you couldn't make it tonight and you're going to be watching this, will be rebroadcast, there's still plenty of time for you to offer your input. You can email the mayor and city council at any time after this meeting. So if you're missing this particular budget town meeting, don't worry, there's plenty of time for input. So with that said, I want to turn it over to the finance director, Duane Pitcher, and I think Nancy Mastow is going to participate too or help out in a presentation on some background information regarding the budget, which I think is very important for the citizens to understand. So take away, Duane.
Thank you, Steve. First of all, I will emphasize that our main focus this evening is to get input on the budget coming up July 1st. But to provide a little basis of background, we're going to talk about where we are for this year, which we're several months into the year. The rates, the property tax rate, that's one key item of the budget. That's the rate that we charge the property for taxes. And we want to emphasize that the city is just part of that property tax bill. For years, we've been about a third of that bill. And you see that here on this graphic. The biggest portion of the property tax goes to the school district. The next biggest is the county, and then the community college. So those are the largest taxing entities. And the city is about a third of the total property tax bill. When you look at the big picture of how those property taxes are divided up, we use the valuation of property, and then we divide the expenses to deliver the services that the citizens are asking for and that the council approves based on the manager's recommendation. So there's two pieces of that equation. You think of it as you go out to eat and you've got a group and you're going to split it up. If that group gets a little bit bigger and the same things with property valuation, you can divide those expenses over a larger base. So that impacts our tax rate. And you can see that changes quite a bit from year to year. this past year, our taxable valuation was only up 1.1%. We had good growth, but there's other factors that lead to that. So that puts a little bit of pressure on the property tax rate. Another factor that impacts the rates is local option sales tax, and that's that 1% local sales tax on taxable retail sales, and 60% of that goes directly to reduce property tax. And this graphic shows the impact of those sales tax. We have had a significant change if you look between 1920 and 2021. That impact of sales tax went up about 6 cents. That really reflects the implementation of the internet sales tax here in Iowa and actually across the nation after the Supreme Court decision. So that's been a positive impact for the local taxpayers. And the other 40% of that local option tax goes to arts and human services. So that all funds some really important services. Where does the money come from? We've talked about property taxes, but that's only kind of a smaller part of our budget. If you look right here, that's about 15%. It's significant, but it's not by any measure the largest portion. The biggest piece, if you look over here, is charges for services. So those are services that are charged when used. And the biggest portion of those are utilities. And the biggest utilities are electric, water, and sewer. We also have stormwater, but the big three are electric, water, and sewer. So the more you use, the more you pay. Those are big operations. That's the biggest part of our budget. Some other significant portions in intergovernmental revenue, that would be grants that move through. If you think about SIRIDE, that has grant funding, community development block grant, states intergovernmental revenue that's passed through the state, the biggest one of which would be road use tax, that's fuel tax, that's allocated per capita. We mentioned property taxes, bond proceeds, that changes from year to year depending on how much capital we have, and have issued bonds to pay for that. Internal services, these are services that charge out to other areas within the city. And then we have some smaller pieces here, use of money and property is primarily interest earnings, and I think everyone knows that those aren't big numbers these days. Okay, this just gives you an idea of the perspective of the total scope of our budget. We have a grand total of revenues of $253 million. $23 million of that is transfers between funds, so that's not new money coming into the city, that's just moving around within the city. But total revenue before transfers is $230 million, so it's a large budget overall. If you look up here at charges for services, that makes up nearly half the budget. And if we look down to where the expenditures are made, not surprisingly, we talked about utilities. They're about 32.2% of expenditures. Now, that's not all of their expenditures. They also have capital improvements that are included in this number. So if you remember, they were almost half the charges or half the revenue. Depending on what they have for capital, they're about half the expenses also. Things that are funded by property tax, some of the bigger areas would include public safety, the police and fire, and not other methods to pay for those. Debt service is primarily paid for out of property taxes. We have some other sources for that. Here's the internal services. That's just the match of that revenue side. Community enrichment, a lot of this is out of property taxes. These are things like parks and recreation, the library, transportation has several items like the streets, SIRIDE. That just gives you an idea of where that money goes. And if you see here, total expenditures or a little bit more than the revenues in that 1 year. And that can happen in any given year because of capital improvement. We fund those over time, and some years we'll spend less and put some away for projects. Some years we'll spend more. But they're usually in a pretty close range. That just gives you an idea of the scope of our budget. Again, over $230 million. Here's some input on the property tax rates. And again, we're just a third. So the total rate is about 3 times this. So our rate here at the city, if you look down to total, is about $10.15 per thousand taxable valuation. That raises about $32 million. There's some pieces of that I'd like to point out. First, the general fund requirement. This is where we're funding things like police and fire, the library, parks and recreation, there's a few other places. We'll get into that. And then that's reduced by local option sales tax, like I mentioned. The state provides some replacement tax. There's some changes they made in property tax 2 years ago. There's another levy called trust and agency, and that is for police and fire benefits. And that's about another 2.1 million. The transit levy, this is the city portion of the contribution to transit. The biggest funder being the students, and then also Iowa State University. Here's our total before debt service at about $7, and then debt service at $3.15. Remember I mentioned that general levy starts out at $7.47. When we have the reductions of the other sources, it comes down to about $5.66. That levy is limited by state code to $8.10. And most cities are at that $8.10 limit. The city of Ames not being there provides some flexibility for the city to be able to, with COVID, and if we need additional funding to keep services going, we're able to fund that if we need to with raising property taxes, or we can lower that if we need to. So just the impact of that rate, it's about $10.15. And what does that amount to per 100,000 of a residential property? So 100,000 in property gets rolled back. There's a factor that rolls back your actual valuation. So if your house is worth 100, 200 just take it times 2, 300 times 3. It gets rolled back to 55%, a little bit more than that, of the value to apply taxes. So that would leave a taxable value of about $55,000, and that would be applied to that tax rate, $10.15. That would result in property taxes per 100,000 of $559. So where does that go? You see that on the next chart. We break out, and we've got some history on here. The biggest piece of it goes to streets and traffic, and a lot of that is the debt service that goes with those larger street projects. The biggest class of expenditures would be protective services, and that would be police and fire together. Library, about $69 goes to the library, and that includes the debt service for the library renewal. Parks and recreation, that also includes some debt service. We have a little bit left for Ada Hayden, and believe it or not, our pool will be paid off in the very near future. Transit, this is that transit levy. General support services, planning services. Now we're getting into some smaller numbers. Resource recovery, that's a utility that I did not mention. There is a small subsidy that goes into that. All of the participant cities pay a per capita amount, and our portion is funded through property taxes. So $9 per 100,000 or $6 per 100,000 goes into resource recovery. Storm sewer, I'd also mentioned, is a utility, and that's the storm sewer fee that goes on to utility bills, but that it does not pay all of the capital. It pays all of the operating, some of the capital. We have a little bit of debt service that comes out of property tax that goes into that. The facilities, the cemetery and airport, they're a small portion. Animal control at about $5. I'll point out building safety. You see zeros in some of these past years. There's a lot of years, depending on the permits that are issued, that building safety also actually contributes to a reduction of property taxes. But depending on the level of those permits, it could use a little bit of taxes. Other years, it contributes. So it's in at $1, a very small amount. This slide just provides a little bit of perspective on what some of the rates are in other cities across Iowa. We're looking at the larger cities. So if you look here, here's Ames at $10.15 that past year. Duke right at about the same number, $10.14, and Ankeny a little under at 10. And again, these are just city portions. But you can see there's quite a range. Council Bluffs at over $18, so significantly more than this larger group down at 10. We also look at what cities have some flexibility, whether they're at the 810 limit or not. If you look at this column, you see that it's basically 810 all the way down, with the exception of Ames there at 553. Dubuque is at 810, and Ankeny's at $6.10. So that just gives you a little bit of idea of perspective. We also look at per capita levy. Again, Ames looks pretty competitive in that category. These can vary quite a bit because it depends on the amount of commercial property that may be in jurisdiction. So West Des Moines, even though they have a relatively low tax rate, they have a fairly high per capita levy, and that's partly driven because they're part of a metro area with a fair amount of commercial property. So that is it as far as just a quick overview of where we are now. We can certainly take questions about that, but again, the emphasis tonight is for public input, and I think we're ready to start hearing from the public.
Let me just emphasize some things. You might have watched Duane's slides and said, well, what about electric and water and sewer? He was talking about the general fund and those services that are supported by property taxes. We run different businesses, different utilities, and they're contained in enterprise funds. So the electric operations, the electric utility, the water utility, the sanitary sewer utilities, that's part of our budget too, but it's not financed by your property taxes. So we were trying to emphasize the property taxes. Those other funds are enterprise funds, and they're paid for by your user fees. You get your monthly bill for the utilities, and it pays for all those different utilities. And it's those operations and capital improvements are supported by those fees. I do want to tell you before you start, it's just like the private sector companies and perhaps your own family. The pandemic has been very stressful for us in terms of financing too. Duane was telling you about the adopted budget, but I can tell you the adopted budget he showed you is not the reality we face today. We have to look at things like the road use tax fund, the local option sales tax fund, the hotel motel tax, parking revenues, building permit revenues, SIRIDE fees, recreation fees. All of them have been hit drastically by the pandemic. As everything closed up, so did participation in a lot of our services. So we had to make some decisions to cut back services. We had to eliminate some capital improvement projects. We had hiring freezes from a lot of our departments through the first half of the year. We canceled all training, out-of-state training and travel. So we had to make adjustments just like you did for this year. Now, the tough part is, how are we going to budget for next year with the uncertainty of how long the pandemic's going to last and what impact it's going to have on all of our lives and your spending patterns and your participation patterns in our local government operations. So we know that people, I think, are under a lot of stress, and we're going to do our best to hold the line on the budgets next year for all of you in terms of property tax increases and also any of the utility increases. Having said that, I want to open up to everybody, and you'll probably have some ideas where you want to spend more. I'm sure the council would also like to know, is there any offsetting costs? Are there any services that you'd like us to see reduced to help offset that? Obviously, if we keep adding more and more on, it's going to be hard for us to hold the line on property tax increases and utility increases. So I'd like to take a running tally of all that and see what it all adds up to from your input today. So I want you to bear with us with the technology. We're going to try to open this up. As you raise your hand one at a time, you'll be brought in. We need you to unmute yourself and also your video so we can see you. It's important you give your name and address, and then your recommendations for the city council. Again, we are going to take notes on this, and we'll pass your comments on to the city council. Not a verbatim transcript of what you said, but we'll try to capture the essence of what you're recommending. Okay, why don't we start? I don't know who's in charge. Is it Susan or Brian's handling this?
Hi, so I will try to record the comments, and I will let Deb or Brian move our guests in to speak.
Okay, so if you're all out there, I want you to all take the time to give us some input. So raise your hand. You know how to raise your hand on there, and then you'll be brought in. We'll tell you which one you're being brought in.
So the first speaker is Lisa Hovis. If you'll just wait one moment, we will move you over. And Lisa, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on your video if you'd like, and begin your comments after you state your address.
Name and address, yep, please.
It looks like we lost Lisa.
Oh, really?
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? You can indicate so by raising your hand. Push the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Oh, there's Lisa again. Just a moment. We'll move you over.
Try Lisa again. Nope. There you go. Hi, Lisa.
Sorry
Hi,
about
Lisa.
that.
How are you?
See? Good.
Could you give us your address, please?
317 Main Street.
Thank you. Have some recommendations for us?
Yes, I am a member of the Ames Historic Preservation Commission and wanted to request an allocation for some signage that we're hoping to have installed on Main Street. What do I tell you here?
Probably a dollar amount, just to give us an idea of the dollar, the magnitude.
$27.91.
27.
91, almost $3,000.
Okay. And you could follow up with specifics of what the signage is and the cost and maybe pictures or stuff. You could send it in to us too, okay?
Yep, absolutely. I've got a specific quote as well as photographs.
Yeah, and Brian, does that go through your process?
I don't believe we've done that in the past, but we would make the council aware of it
Okay.
as a part of the budget wrap-up issues.
Okay. Great, Lisa. You can follow up with us and give us some more information. That'd be helpful.
Okay, can you put on there that it's for the AHPC?
Yep, good
Okay.
point. Sorry.
Anything further, Lisa?
Nope, so you will follow up with me, or should I just send something somewhere?
If you don't mind sending it to, you can send it to me, my office,
Okay.
please.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to give us input.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
All right, the next speaker will be Kathy Scott. Just a moment, I'll move you over.
Okay, my name is Catherine Scott and I live at 1510 Roosevelt in Ames. And last year I asked about progress on a new municipal pool. So I would like to ask about that again. I don't know where you are on that, but I'm hoping you're going to put some money aside to plan for that and maybe have a bond issue and actually get it done.
I hear you. Actually, we had money in a list to start planning on it, but we cut it out as part of the impacts of the pandemic. So we'll have to think about, that's one thing we have to think about, putting money aside for planning for that in the next fiscal year.
Okay, and the other concern I have was money to start implementing a climate action plan once you get the plan developed. I don't know exactly where you are in that procedure, but if we would have a plan by the next budget year, then I think we probably need some money to begin implementing the plan.
Well, they're moving ahead with putting the RFP together. We've been stalled on a lot of projects with the pandemic, even with consultants who can take the time and participate like they need to come here to Ames and talk. But I believe what will happen is we've got the money and I'm going to recommend we carry it forward. It's over $100,000 to, I think it's $130,000 for the plan itself, and probably that will take over a year. So I'm not sure we put the implementation money in the next year budget yet. It may be the year after. We just don't know what it would take. Not only you have to have a plan, but you're then have to put an implementation plan together. It won't all be done at once. And I'd hate to raise taxes not knowing how much there is right now. So I want you to know that as far as the staff's concerned, we're going to recommend the council carry over that money so we can move ahead with the plan itself. But we anticipate a lot of public participation in this. So I think you've seen how long it's taken to do our long-range plan, our comprehensive plan. And I think that this is such an important project. I would hope we could get a lot of people involved in this project too. So I think the council will put money in once we get the implementation plan in. I'm pretty sure that'll happen.
Catherine, did I capture your information correctly?
Well, I think she wants funds for implementation, yeah. But if I ask you how much, it'd be tough for you to answer, and it'd be tough for me to decide how much to put in right now too. That's why I'd rather, before I put money in to raise taxes, I'd rather have a little more information on what I need and what year I need it in, for the implementation, but that will come. The plan is not the end. Obviously, you've got to implement it. I'm assure you of that.
Okay, thank you.
Good comments. Thank you, Catherine. Who's next?
I don't see anyone else with their hand raised at the moment.
Well, wait a minute. I'm going to go call on people then.
Oh, okay. We have a couple hands going up.
There you go. Stan, don't let me embarrass you now.
Stan Raby.
Yep. His hand went up, right?
Yes.
Then Merlin will be
And
next.
I've moved you over so you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like.
Hi, Stan.
Okay, I think this is working right.
Good.
First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. Secondly, I don't know if this is the right forum for this, but now is as good a time as any. I know that there are several of the arts organizations in town. We are very generously supported by CODA, and that's for operations. But if you look at, for instance, Ames benefits from Stevens Auditorium. Ames benefits from the Octagon. Ames, and of course, the one that I'm involved in, Ames benefits from actors. And it would behoove the city of Ames to have some kind of capital contributions or to support capital projects by these organizations. And again, I don't know if this is the format to do it in, but
yeah, I think like it's a
that's
discussion.
That's a good way of developing. And I know there are other organizations that are out there that can use the same kind of city support, because that kind of development is very difficult for the small nonprofits.
Right, I understand. Can I ask you a question? What's the magnitude of the amount of money you think's needed? Is it a 1-year deal, or is it 10 years in a row, or what are you thinking? I have no idea of the magnitude.
When I look at this, I've been stewing about this for a year. So I think it's a case of a pot of money that would be available over several years and have it be competitive, just like CODA is.
I understand.
And to say, this is what organization A would like to do. This is what somebody else would like to do. And those organizations that can make the best case, and again, I'm speaking from actors, we might not have the best proposal, or we might not choose, the city might not choose to support one versus the other. But capital money is the hardest thing to come by for arts organizations. And for us to be able to continue to make a contribution, that's one way that the city can help us out.
Well, let me ask you another way. What would be an appropriate level per grant, do you think, that would be helpful? I mean, you could give everybody $1 million, too much, or you give everybody $5, not enough. That's
way too much.
What's a good size grant allocation? I'm putting you on the spot.
I tell you that, for instance, when I look at the projects that we're looking into, we're lots of times looking at someplace between $20,000 and $50,000.
Okay.
And you don't have to pay for all of it, but to support that would be very helpful.
Okay.
We're out there now saying we're adding on to our building. That's $500,000. We don't expect the city to give us $500,000 to add on to the building. But there are other things that we would like to do to the building, and high cost expenses like lights and sound and seating and all those kinds of things that we hear about how the ongoing maintenance of a place like Stevens or the maintenance of the Octagon building. Those are big ticket items. And it would be wonderful for the city to reinvest. And those are the three that I'm most familiar with. But there have to be others.
Sure. Okay, I understand. We got that, Susan?
Are those, question, Steve, are those, and Stan, are those, is that primarily capital improvement or, hard costs or soft costs for operation that you're thinking about, Stan?
I'm thinking capital improvement or major maintenance costs. Things, that when I think about some of the things that haven't been done that I see haven't been done, they're physically doing something to the facilities that are big ticket items. And lots of times they get delayed because, the operating costs, the soft costs, the annual costs aren't there. And so you push them off another year if you at all possibly can.
Susan, I think it means for the arts, not just all nonprofits. I think it's.
So you said.
Oh
both
yeah,
of
definitely
both
the
ways.
arts.
The
Okay.
arts, we're
I just
focusing.
wanted to
Other
clarify.
nonprofits probably have the same situation.
Right.
I'm kind
You
of,
said, so I want to make sure, you said nonprofit ones and arts, but do you just mean arts?
Yes, I think
I'm gonna
Nonprofit
say the
arts?
arts, yeah.
that's okay. That's
Yeah,
it's harder. I have to be honest with you. It's harder to give. I think. By the way, the mayor's here, and also David Martin's on. Councilperson Martin. It's harder to give ongoing operational costs than it is one-time capital, quite frankly, because you rely on it, and we hate to give it to you, and then you expect to get it for the next 20 years. Well,
Yeah,
those revenues go up and down, as you can see. I can show you where our revenues down, perhaps in local option sales tax or convention visitor hotel motel money, but one-time capital is probably easier than ongoing operational costs. But I understand your point.
this year, for example, we applied for a Prairie Moon grant.
Yep.
And, because of COVID, they took all of and that's a capital kind of grant.
Yeah.
They rightfully gave it to the food bank and similar kinds of charities.
More urgent, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Susan, I think on that capital improvements and maintenance contribute to the art, because I think he's not just saying making general contributions, but it's actually improvements and or maintenance to arts organizations. Right, Stan? Is that correct?
Yeah. And we're talking big ticket items.
Correct. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Hey, Steve, I just want to go back to what Captain Scott was asking you about. It is a goal of the city council that was set in January on the pool to be moving, is one of our 2-year goals. So just to encourage her that it was something that was adopted in January or February, I'm sorry. But as everyone can appreciate, we kind of got sidetracked with the COVID and the like. And so I think they'll probably start seeing that goal be dusted off and worked on going forward.
Well, there's another reason too. I think we didn't feel comfortable asking the people to pass a bond issue during this time too. I think we want to make sure we hope in the next year, next 6 months, things will return somewhat normal. People feel comfortable about their finances. And we have to pass a bond issue of 60%. It's tough for people to make that kind of investment right now in us. So it wasn't just financial, I think, on our part. We had to make some cutbacks. But I don't think we felt comfortable asking people to pass a bond issue for a multi-million-dollar project within this year. So we'll see. But it's a good point.
That and engaging in public conversations and focus groups and the like has been
right.
Just trying to navigate all that. So
right. I saw Merlin there. He waited. Brian, he was waiting.
Yes, Merlin Fonkook, I'll move you over in just a moment.
You're muted, Merlin. Oh, you're muted. You have to unmute. Merlin, you have to unmute. Go to the bottom left, I think. You'll see it. Bottom left.
Okay, there.
You got it.
There we
Perfect.
go.
Sorry, I haven't participated in a meeting like this, so I don't know where the buttons are. I'm Merlin Plunkoot, 1424 Kellogg Avenue. And I can look out my window and tell you one project that I would have recommended for cutting. Secondly, it's a little late for that. Is there a document that would tell me where you've made the cuts in the current year? I haven't been following the council very carefully, so maybe it's been presented to council, but is there a document that the public can look at to see where you've been making cuts? Secondly,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Secondly, do you have a feel for what the pandemic is doing on a percentage basis to the local option tax and the hotel motel tax? I meant to call the university today, but I forgot until it was too late. I've been waiting all fall for a number on the percentage of students who are actually in Ames. I don't really know how many are total virtual and are not here, and that certainly has a great impact on our economy if
Right.
the number is down substantially. One more thing, I guess those are my main questions. There are more questions than input,
okay.
but as I think about the budget for next year, certainly these are key factors, and the public doesn't really have any feel for this at this point, as far as I know.
I appreciate it. That's one of our jobs. We're putting together not only next year's budget, but we go to the council with the amended budget for this year. So that's what we're working on now. The departments are going to get a better feel of where they're at and what they had to cut back to help balance the budget for this year. Because as I said, what was appropriated and adopted is not going to be our real ending budget. So I'm sure revenue is going to be down, and departments are going to have to show me how they've cut back to reduce the expenditures to meet the revenue there. So we're working on that now. We also have to wait for a big final number from the state on our local option sales tax to see how we're doing for this year. And then more difficult. It'll be more difficult. Then everything's more difficult, I think, to think about next year, because I don't know, is it going to be bad in the next? We're talking about 18 months in advance, really, right? We're going to have to approve this now for expenditures that will be all the way through June 30th of the next year. So that's going to be the tough one to try to project where we're at. So I'll have a better feeling for the cutbacks and where we're at and all that. If you stay tuned to the budget, that's what we're going to be doing in the next couple of months. We've got to figure this all out by January 29th, when we release it all. So we got a lot of work to do. And, as far as, I do know hotel motel tax has been devastated. I know, I think I have a meeting with their representatives, and I think, don't quote me, but I think they're down. They already made substantial cutbacks in staff, and I still think they're down $300,000 or so, they're telling me. So we have to talk about that, right, with them. I don't know the exact number. It's interesting. Cyride's ridership for the first time is down. It's down 40%. And that's very interesting. So everything seems to be down. Local option, I might be a little more bullish on. We might find it's not good for our downtown, but we might find a lot of people were shopping online. And fortunately, now we get part of the local option tax. The 1% is now charged on online sales. So we're a little more optimistic we are with that than we are hotel motel tax and road use tax and things like that. And we have to wait a little longer. The longer I wait, the better I'll get the numbers as far as projecting for next year and this year. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next couple of months.
Does any one of you, have you heard really about the number of Iowa State students that are actually in Ames?
Do not know. I don't know. And I'm sure I think the university would know. I'm sure they would know.
Yeah, I just forgot to call them until it was too late, because I wanted to be able to have that number.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm finished.
Good question.
Can I make sure, did you want to have sidewalk infill under the spend less category?
I'm not sure. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I put you down.
I think
Steve,
David
if I
had,
could,
I think,
yeah, if I
Steve,
could
I think
mention
David had a
something.
question, had a comment.
Yeah, I think Merlin also asked if there was a list of cuts that had been made, and I just remember that we did do a budget amendment earlier this year. I forget what the date, when the date was, but it had a long list of
That was the money
projects that
from
were
the
being
carryover, right,
postponed or-
Nancy?
I think where we made the first cuts was when we did the final amendment last May. And I can check if it's not still out on the website, we can get it put back on there. But that's where the departments really, they amended their budgets when the pandemic started last spring too. We cut revenues and expenses and tried to make everything break even for what we had projected for last fiscal year.
We also had that long list of carryover money from the general fund we thought we were gonna spend, and we cut there too, right?
Right,
Remember that list?
yes. So
Nancy, is it possible to send Merlin a link, a hot link to that?
Yes.
When it's up and running, so he can go ahead and have access to it? That'd be helpful for him.
I can talk directly with Nancy too.
Yeah, I could just email it to you directly, Merlin, if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thanks, Merlin. Brian, we got another hand up? Oh,
Yes, the next person is Heather Johnson. Just a moment, I'll move you over.
All right, are you able to hear?
yes, could you give us her address, please?
Sure, absolutely. Heather Johnson, 310 Topaz in Ames, 50010.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, thank you all, everybody, for this open forum for the budget. And I want to echo what Stan said about as far as funding for the arts. And we know everybody's been hit drastically from COVID. But looking forward, I was looking at numbers even comparative to Iowa City and how their culture and recreation, they have 11% built into their 2020 to 2024 plan. And as of right now, I believe the community enrichment for the city of Ames is closer to 6%. I know right now is not possibly the time to do it, but when things are better, I think it'd be great for the city of Ames to incorporate a little bit more financial investment into the community enrichment part, as well as the arts and rec part of the budget, and how the Iowa City really places culture as part of their plan into their budget as well as their values. So I'm just echoing kind of a bit of what Stan said, and hopefully there'll be a little bit more plan to give a little bit more to the arts overall. And I know he was talking more about possibly the structural component too, but I think also just the longevity would be a great part of it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Does that capture somewhat of what you said, Heather?
Think so.
Okay.
All right. All right, next, anybody? Now you're all out there. Someone wants to say something, I'm sure. Anybody else? Come on. Valerie? Yep.
Valerie Williams, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Got it. And I'm going to do.
Hello.
Hi there. So I'm Valerie Williams. I live at 703 Carroll in Ames, 50010. And I would like to echo what Stan said also. I am feeling the lack right now of a small, okay, So, and I know this is partly pandemic, but it also has been just going on in Ames in general in the last several years. Our small organizations, music, dance, our small arts and cultural organizations no longer have a space to present work in. And I'm not talking about our beautiful auditorium, which is lovely and wonderful, but seats 800 plus people. I'm thinking about, spaces in other cities that I've been in that are small, that seat between 30 and 100 people, and are good for music, for small performances, theater, dance, pretty much everything. It might not be exactly an if you build it, they will come sort of thing, but by not having those spaces any longer, DG's Tap House, Zeke's, those small spaces, we no longer have spaces available for our creative small groups to work with. And I think that having that capital improvement may allow us to find a space or spaces that would let small organizations be able to present their work more easily.
Gotcha. So smaller venue, did you say 30 to 100?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Certainly under 250. Small enough that experimental work, I always think that we can gauge the health of a community, not so much by the really large organizations and by the health of the large organizations, but really by the health of the small organizations, because we're the people who feed into those big organizations.
Understand. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the
Appreciate it.
opportunity.
Sure. Anyone else? Oh, get that, Susan? Yep, dance for no space. Okay. Anybody else? Let's see, who's still out there, hasn't spoken? No one else?
We do have we had a hand. There it is. Sam Schill. Just a moment. I'll move you over.
Hey, Sam.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. I am pretty good at this Zoom thing. So I've been on this thing for like 6 hours a day. So I know where the buttons are.
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to share quickly. I've been part of, I think, gosh, it might have even been this meeting last year and some other conversations around around what could the city do to play a role in the way I've really looked at it lately is a spark in the arts and culture community. Because you can't solve the whole problem because they're not all artists, and you can't build all sorts of infrastructure out of the blue. That's not going to happen. But the best thing that I can think of from if we're asking and talking about budgeting and allocating some money is to figure out how to have that person that is, best I can tell, either would be a full-time or part-time staff member that would have a focus on the culture and arts. So a director of culture and arts that would really be able to work with all of these smaller groups, that would be able to evaluate our venue space, that would, back in my library board days, I remember in other things, there's feasibility studies that are done for dang near everything. And there's a reason for that, because we don't know if they're good ideas until there's focus given to an understanding. And I don't know how you do a feasibility study on arts and culture in our unique town. I don't know, but I think someone that was focused on it for a 2 or 3 year period would come up with some real clear definition around where we could go, what we could do, and likely create some revenue generating opportunities, as well as provide some free services or some free opportunities for people to experience art and culture without that role right now, unless somebody from the private sector decides to do it, I mean, I'd do it, Steve. I could do it full, but I can't. So someone that could be the glue, the spark that interacted with the business. And in a lot of ways, I represent the business community in some ways, an up and coming kind of new, we have an office downtown. There's a bunch of cool offices, people working downtown. There needs to continue. There is some momentum around it. And I think someone that had some focus to really talk to all walks of life, from the business side to the arts and culture side to the young family side, and could design some programming and figure out where we would maybe need grants, write the grants, all that legwork. I know it's just a ton of stuff to get done. And I think the city could play a unique role in that and allocating some amount of funds. Now, I don't know what would it take to hire that person exactly. You guys might have a better sense on from other cities, but.
Are you focusing on the position, or, I mean, you can hire, it could be a company, or you want the end product or the position?
Yeah, I really.
A climate action plan. What you need is a feasibility plan on the arts. Are you focusing on that or the position? I guess I'm asking.
I like the position, so it could be someone that could rubber it, just get going and try things that are not just in theory things we could do, but run programming, try ideas at the band shell, try ideas at a tournament. If no one shows up and everybody doesn't like it, that's one thing. But I believe that that there'll be some successes that we can learn from inside of that. But I'm not sure, if so it's all about a position. I think that's the best thing I can think of without saying we need.
That's right. I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
No problem. That's all I got.
Susan, you got it? And to develop a feasibility plan, I guess, right? Community-wide feasibility plan.
Yeah, I think that could be part of it. And I guess I'm just saying, in the essence of their role in the requirements and expectations, that they're reporting back to something, city council, some other subcommittee that's saying, this is what I'm seeing Ames having a uniqueness in, and here's what our citizens need. But it is, like I said, it's someone that's got feet on the streets that may intimately know this community at some level, so that they're relatable and understand it. Could be someone from outside the community as well that's an expert in this, but someone that's getting FaceTime or Zoom time with people to understand everything.
I got you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Who else? Anybody else? Nobody else. Nobody? You all want to go home early? Oh, you're already home. All right. I'm not going to drag it out of you. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to give input, but please remember, we're at the beginning of the process, so there is plenty of time to participate and give input to the council. So if you're watching a replay of this, you can email the council, email me, or you can email Duane Pitcher with your ideas for the budget. Either way, we'll make sure copies are made and send out to the council. We'll also give a copy of your comments here to the council too, before their final decisions. Please remember those dates, important dates. Remember those dates. We'll be unveiling our capital improvement plan on January 19th. Then the public will give opinions on the capital improvement plan to the city council on January 26th. We'll start with the overview of the budget on January 29th. And then the next week, February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, with a wrap up on the 9th. The key date is the 9th of February. That's when we'll ask the council to make the final decisions. So there's plenty of time to give them input before that time. And then they'll have to make decisions, because we have to certify the budget before March. Actually, it's later in March this year. It's changed for the budget for next fiscal year. And it does impact not only next year's budget, but also how we finish this year. We're going to be talking to the council about that too. All right. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time. It's going to be a tough year for all of us, but we hope next year is going to be, we're going to be a lot more optimistic. We're going to feel better, very positive, and we can continue to do great things for the city of Ames with all your help. So the people who participated, I greatly appreciate that. Okay? Everybody stay healthy, stay safe, and stay in tune with the budget process, if you would, please. Thank you very much.